All right, let's dive in. We're looking at your stack of sources on colonial America, basically from 1492 all the way up to that pivotal year, 1763.
And to really get it, you have to see this era not just as settlement, but as a violent collision. A collision of, biology, culture, economics.
A collision is a strong word.
It was. I mean, the sources are clear that the central story here is the demographic catastrophe of the Columbian Exchange. We're talking old world diseases causing mortality rates up to 95% in some indigenous communities.
And what's often missed is that this often happened before settlers even showed up.
Exactly. It cleared the landscape for places like Plymouth before anyone even landed.
That context is just vital. So let's get into the early arrivals. The Spanish, they set what the sources call the Iberian precedent.
Driven by that classic formula, God, gold, and glory. They were there for conquest, for mineral wealth.
And St. Augustine, in 1565, stands as proof. It's the oldest continuously occupied European city in North America.
But then you contrast that really rigid approach with the French and the Dutch. Their motives were totally different.
Commercial, right?
Purely commercial. They weren't after massive land settlement. They wanted the fur trade. So New France, Quebec in 1608, it created this huge strategic arc from Quebec all the way down to New Orleans.
And New Netherland, which became New York, that feels like an outlier in the sources. So much more pluralistic.
It was, but it kind of had to be. It was entirely dependent on a trade alliance with the powerful Iroquois Confederacy. That forced a kind of diversity you just didn't see with the Spanish.
That focus on trade brings us to the British, who developed these two, radically different models. Let's start with the Chesapeake, Virginia.
All about one thing: tobacco, a hugely labor-intensive cash crop.
And that relentless pursuit of profit is what drove the system into racial slavery. But the sources show it wasn't an immediate switch.
No, not at all. It was a gradual hardening.
So when did it really pivot? Was there like a single moment where it goes from indentured servitude to codified racial slavery?
It was a series of legal sanctions that locked it in. You see a clear shift in 1640 with the John Punch case. He was the first person legally sanctioned to a life of servitude based on race.
While the white runaways just got more time added to their service.
Right. And then the big one is 1662 with partus sequitur ventrum.
Wait, what does that actually mean? It's a very dense Latin phrase.
It just means that the status of the child free or enslaved followed the status of the mother.
Ah.
And that was revolutionary. It made slavery hereditary, which, dramatically increased the long-term wealth potential of owning people.
And this whole system was then cemented by political fear after Bacon's rebellion in 1676.
Absolutely. The rebellion terrified the planter elite because it unified the underclass, poor whites, servants, enslaved Africans, all against them.
So the solution was to divide and conquer.
Exactly. The sources argue they deliberately hardened the racial lines. They replaced the unreliable white servant class with totally disenfranchised enslaved Africans as a primary method of social control.
Meanwhile, way up in New England, you have the Puritans. Completely different motivation.
All faith, this idea of being a city upon a hill. But it had these interesting civic side effects, like the 1647 Massachusetts school law.
Early public education, basically.
Driven by the need for everyone to be able to read the Bible. Now, as these colonies all matured, two forces really started pushing them towards self-rule.
The first being salutary neglect.
Right. For a long time, Britain just wasn't strictly enforcing its own trade laws, and that vacuum allowed the colonial assemblies to get really powerful.
Because they held the power of the purse, didn't they? They could control the royal governor's salary, which made him loyal to them, not to London.
Precisely. And the second thing was the First Great Awakening in the 1730s and 40s.
The religious revival.
Yeah, and it encouraged people to question spiritual authority. And once you start questioning your pastor, it becomes a lot easier to, start questioning your governor. Crucially, it was the first major event shared across all the colonies. It started building a common identity.
And this all leads us to that hinge year, 1763. The Treaty of Paris ends the French and Indian War. Britain wins everything east of the Mississippi. A total victory.
A total and incredibly costly victory. It doubled Britain's national debt to a staggering $140 million.
And that debt immediately creates this fundamental contradiction.
It does.
You've just fought as a proud Britain to secure the entire continent, only to be immediately told, no, you can't cross the mountains. The Proclamation of 1763.
It forbade settlement west of the Appalachians, mostly to prevent more costly conflicts like Pontiac's Rebellion. But for the colonists, it felt like a betrayal.
And that victory meant the end of salutary neglect.
Yes. Parliament's logic was simple. We incurred this debt protecting you, so you will help pay for your own defense. And that shift is what ignited the whole crisis over taxation without representation.
So, as your sources lay out, the British victory in 1763, the very moment the colony should have been most secure, actually removed the one thing binding them to the empire.
The French threat. That external enemy was gone.
Which leaves you with a pretty provocative thought. Was that decisive British victory actually a catastrophic strategic failure that all but guaranteed the revolution to come? Something for you to ponder as you reflect on this deep dive.